You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky. Lots to get into today, Andy. We're going to open up the mailbag if we can. Already got some questions now that looking forward to next year, what team looks like and how things are going to play out. So we'll try to get to all that. Kyle Kuzma did himself a pretty interesting Twitter version of the Reddit AMA. Took some questions. I guess he was on a flight, had some interesting responses to those, which we'll talk about. But Andy, this is really our first chance to react to the news of Friday. Both the press conferences that the Lakers had introducing a lot of their new free agent acquisitions, not all of them, but many of them, a lot of interesting stuff coming out of that. And then the big news, which came in a late Friday news dump, the rare good news Friday news dump. Frank Vogel has an extension. I haven't seen anything, Andy, on how long, but the point is he's not a lame duck going into this season. We talked about it on Friday's episode. This is a really big deal to get it over with.
Yeah, you just want to eliminate any type of storyline or concern that there could be with Frank Vogel if he was going into this year without that type of security. Like, you don't want a repeat of all those narratives that you had with Frank Vogel and Jason Kidd when he first got hired. And, you know, Kidd was seen as the guy that was there basically just to shank him and take his job. And it's also important too, Brian, beyond just whatever narratives can come from this or media chat or whatever, is you don't want to see Frank Vogel's ability to coach constricted in any way because it feels like he's under a microscope. Like whether you're talking about the ability to experiment, implement concepts that could pay
absolutely
off, like they could pay off in April, but they require patience and you have to know there are going to be bumps there. It's easier to do that if you're not looking over your shoulder. If you have to make rotation decisions that could be politically difficult, not playing certain veterans.
The rotation stuff is I think particularly critical because like the Lakers need to give themselves the space to get off to a 8-8 start, a 10-10 start, which ultimately probably won't matter to them, but a lot of that could come with Vogel having to go in and figure out like this team, you can put 12 different guys on the floor. Like there's plenty of depth on this team in terms of playable NBA guys. What we don't know yet is how all of those pieces fit together. And beyond just the how does Russ fit thing, the how does everybody else fit around the big three is its own like puzzle that needs to be figured out. Like you say, that could require some experimentation and you don't want to feel limited. The other thing that I think is really important here too is the Lakers pride themselves on being a team that treats people the right way, that rewards people for success, treats people like family and all that stuff. Vogel won a title with them and has coached 2 seasons under very different and difficult circumstances. And I think he's done a great job. I mean, obviously the title season, he was, I think, pretty masterful in button pushing and timing and all that. But last year was no piece of cake either. And I think he did a great job there too. It's a bad look for an organization who prides itself on that sort of thing to let him get into this year without a contract.
Yeah, there is an element of seriously, what else does he need to do to solidify your confidence in him? And like at that point, you really
other than I guess being sort of a sexier name or
right.
Like
but I was going to say
sexier man. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in a certain light, I think Vogel looks good.
Talk to Mrs. Vogel. There's a lid.
I mean, look, is he prime Pat Riley? No, but I mean, few people were. I mean, that guy was the inspiration for Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. Michael Douglas. No shortage on sexy himself. I mean, that's a high baseline. But then again, sometimes you don't even realize what sexy is until you spend some time with it. It can grow on you. Jeannie Buss has said in the beginning she didn't think Phil was particularly hot. Like it took some time around him, getting to know him. Right. Like sexiness can be an essence, Brian. It's not just what's on the paper. Not just what's on the surface.
Stop being so shallow.
Exactly. But anyway, it would make you think, all joking aside, it would make you think that Vogel having been their third or fourth choice initially is something that they haven't been able to let go of. Like
Right.
that's what it would make you think if they weren't still willing to commit long-term to Frank. It would basically be, this was never the guy we wanted to bring in. And despite this success, we still don't see him as our guy.
Yeah. And so the Lakers have removed something from the table that could have been a real distraction. I know we use that word all the time with media. Like, this really would have been. It had the potential to be a massive distraction and a big problem for the Lakers. They have removed that from the table, rewarded the guy who deserved it, and they'll go in without these sorts of questions hanging over them, which is a great thing. So other things, and we'll talk about a couple of these that stuck out to you on Friday as the Lakers introduced some of their new free agent acquisitions.
Yeah, they introduced Kendrick Dunn, Talen Horton-Tucker, Wayne Ellington, Malik Monk, and Trevor Ariza, and Dwight Howard, a few of those guys having been with the team before.
Reintroduced, right. Yeah.
Yeah. One big theme, Brian, that came up was just selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
You heard in particular Wayne Ellington talk a lot about that in terms of not caring about what his role is going to be. You have to be out there rooting for each other, putting the team first. That was something Trevor Ariza talked about. He talked a lot about holding guys accountable. Dwight Howard got into that a lot. Obviously, Dwight was, the poster boy for that during his second stint with the Lakers, the year they won the championship. And there have been all those doubts in particular about Dwight's willingness and ability, frankly, from a mental standpoint, to do that, given all the other stuff that had happened in his career. That was a big thing that came up a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this is a function this year where things may have gone wrong. One of the ways I think things may have gone wrong with Trez and Schroeder last year isn't so much like, look, both guys, let's get all sheet here, but both guys played hard. And their effort on the court wasn't an issue. What I think was tricky about it is the Lakers brought in more talent, but they brought it in at a time where those guys were still playing for important, business considerations. Schroeder's been paid before, but he's in line to go onto the open market theoretically for what I hoped, and obviously isn't going to turn out that way. I'm not saying it went well, but like he was in a place where he, the business of trying to make of his marketability was an issue. Montrezl Harrell, the general expectation was he could come to the Lakers, have a great year, opt out of his contract, and sign something else.
You and I both thought he was a one-year guy.
Absolutely,
when they brought him in.
Absolutely.
And we're fine with it. We were totally fine with it.
Absolutely. And that he turned out to be a guy who picked up his second year wasn't necessarily a great result to that story for anybody in terms of both how he, his production on the floor and for him. I think he was hoping for an open market deal. What they've done this year, and I don't mean to knock those guys because I get it. I'm not even saying they're being unreasonable, but what they've done this year is they've kind of changed back to the dynamic that they had the year before. Trevor Ariza, Dwight Howard, Wayne Ellington to some degree, I think maybe could have gotten a little more. All these guys could have gotten a little bit more money, but they're all at places in their careers, these guys particularly, where this is kind of what they are. Carmelo Anthony is absolutely in this boat. The role that they have in the league, which is basically fill something on a team that needs you, probably for a veteran's minimum, for as long as you're capable of playing. There isn't a giant payday waiting for Trevor Ariza if he plays well this year. There isn't a giant payday waiting for Dwight Howard if he plays well this year. It basically just means you get to keep going next year if you'd like. And they didn't do that with everybody. Malik Monk is definitely in that sort of make good kind of deal.
Yeah,
and I want to talk about that in a few minutes here. But for the most part, they have signed guys who kind of fit into that. And, Kendrick Dunn is a younger guy, but he's got 2 years on that deal and has the flexibility with that second year option to kind of choose his own adventure, so to speak. So, you can say what you want about the age thing, but here, at least in terms of signing guys to minimum deals or whatever, I do think the Lakers have found a way to eliminate some of those business considerations from the team dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still going to be politics to this when you've got guys who've been in the
Always.
league for a long time and they've
Always.
got a certain amount of stature. That is, like saying earlier, a big
Someone's
reason.
not going to be happy. There are guys who are not going to be happy at some point in terms
that's
of the
why
amount that they're playing.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's a big deal that Frank Vogel has, the backing of the front office, and presumably with that, the backing of LeBron and AD. Because, for example, Melo is a guy that I'm very interested to see how his playing time progresses moving forward. Because he's somebody that, to be totally honest, the more I've thought about it, the more I think he's more of a great story signing than really a great signing. Like, I don't think he's a bad signing. But
no, for the minimum, stand outside, hit 3-pointers, and all that.
But he's
somebody. It's not a guarantee he's going to play a lot.
Right. He's somebody that I've been wondering lately if his roster spot itself might have been better used elsewhere. And they still got a couple of open slots, but like I was thinking about whether a James Ennis type, or literally James Ennis himself, might be a better use of that slot. Melo, though, has a lot of stature. Yeah. Like, Melo is somebody who carries a lot of weight wherever he goes. And even at this stage of his career, diminishing his role beyond anything he thought he was agreeing to will require some massaging. So it's important that Vogel has, I think, the backing and ability to do that.
Yeah, totally agree. Kendrick Dunn and Malik Monk both said some interesting things as the younger guys on this team as to why they came here. That I think is interesting. The stuff with Kuz and his AMA on the social media plays into a lot of this stuff. And so let's talk about all that stuff next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Stat Hero. Did you know 85% of people who play daily fantasy sports lose? You want to know why? It's because the game is rigged. Not. Yeah, the game is rigged against you. It's like one of those carnival games where you try to throw a ping pong ball into a goldfish bowl. Nobody ever wins. And in most
it's also rigged because the goldfish you win is going to die in about a half hour anyway.
Oh, the whole thing is a racket. This is how the carnies
who's behind it, Andy? Big goldfish.
Big goldfish, big carny, all of them.
Yeah.
And in most fantasy sports situations, you're playing against thousands of other lineups, not to mention experts who have more tools, they have more time. You're done. There's a saying in gambling, if you can't spot this sucker at the table, it's you. And that's the same concept here. And that's why you should be playing Stat Hero. It's the first ever daily fantasy sports book that puts the players in control and winning within reach. Stat Hero shows you the lineups and dares you to beat them. It's you versus the house in head-to-head fantasy matchups. You name your stakes. Winner take all. Stat Hero is showing you the lineups ahead of time. Nobody else does that. So play Stat Hero now. Change the odds. Go to stathero.com/lockedon. Sign up for free right now. You can get 3 times back on your first play. They're giving you a 300% match. That's unheard of. So go to stathero.com/lockedon. stathero.com/lockedon.
So Andy, we talked in the last segment about, guys and roles and the value of signing players and having players, even if they are a little bit older, who are past the point in their careers where they're trying to land a big deal. You compromise sometimes on talent there, but fit can be enhanced there. The 2 young guys that they brought on, Kendrick Dunn and Malik Monk, I thought were both interesting in terms of how, when they explained why they chose the Lakers. And so much of that, to me, could be interpreted as, I am basically, Monk especially, like, I'm a young guy. I realize I'm signing below market. I realize this is costing me money now, but the amount that I can get better and improve by being in this atmosphere, both he and Nunn really described this move for them as an investment in their future, giving up current returns on their contract for the ability to make more money later by becoming better players. It's August. How well that holds, if particularly Monk, I think Nunn's playing time is pretty much sealed, but Monk is in that mix of guys where I don't know how that's going to turn out exactly. But at least right now, I thought those answers were great answers, but also kind of revealing of who these guys might be, because that is it's a very mature way of looking at your career in totality, particularly for somebody like Monk, who has been, fair to say, all over the place in his first 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it can be overstated enough what type of risk Malik Monk is taking in terms
It's a big
of
one. Yeah.
in terms of setting up his future. Because as much as you talked about the environment that he thinks he can learn a lot, he talked about wanting to be a Laker in terms of learning, like everything from the actual basketball and all the different things he can learn about becoming a better professional, a better player, all the different things he can learn about that makes you better in your sport, to like literally learning more about being a man. Like he actually said, I'm 23 years old. Like there's more I have to learn about just being an adult and being surrounded by all of these adults who have this type of stature, in his profession. He thought he could learn a lot from. That being said, like he is potentially setting himself up, depending on the way this works, to not actually be able to showcase everything that he learned and actually put himself financially behind the 8 ball.
Oh, it
is
a big bet on himself. It is a major bet on himself that he may not get to realize, and it may not even end up being his fault. It might just be combinations. If Ellington is shooting the way that the Lakers hope, and Monk slips just a little bit by signing Kendrick Dunn, the need for Monk, a guy who can go create his own shot, do all that stuff. And we're going to talk a lot more. I need more people to explain Malik Monk to me. I think it's a great signing, but I'm not as excited at it as I think a lot of fans are, in part because I'm more skeptical about the player. So we're gonna get into this. We're gonna get into a lot of these guys with the people who have covered them. But so while I don't know if that investment is going to pay off, to hear a guy at 23 talk that way and recognize, I mean, look, he's not wrong. LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, presumably somebody like Jared Dudley is going to be back. You have Trevor Ariza,
Wayne Ellington. These are pros.
I mean, if you ever needed a place where, as a 23-year-old guy, or Nunn is 25, I believe, where you could come, and Nunn knows. Yeah. Nunn knows from his stuff because he's coming from Miami. So he knows the value of this type of culture. It says a lot to me about who Malik Monk is, that this was so important to him. And again, it's a press conference. It's August. They say the right thing, but I'm sure he was offered more money somewhere. At the very least, he could have signed at the minimum with places where his path to 30 minutes a night was a hell of a lot clearer than it is here.
I was going to say, for Malik Monk, the big risk is that he had right idea, wrong approach team to the idea. Yeah. With Nunn too, what I find really interesting about it, beyond his, as you said, seeking to learn more, is that he's a guy that has a taste of winning already. Like he has done nothing but go into playoff runs since the moment he entered the league. He's somebody that's, had some turbulence before coming in the league. He's had some serious off-court issues that.
Right. If people don't know, there was an issue when he was an incident when he was at Illinois that kept him from being drafted, of really awful domestic violence.
Yeah, I mean, it got him kicked off the team.
And to be honest, I maybe I'd read about it, but I didn't know.
I didn't know.
It is not something that I realized until it was pointed out to me. So like, there are legit serious things in his past that, people should be aware of, and this conversation never stops.
Right. But the point being, though, with Nunn, like he's had a taste of what this team is about. And, the idea of trying to grow while being in a winning environment, I think, is something that you really understand the value of when you've been in that winning environment before. Like, the money, whatever money that Nunn left on the table, I don't know how significant it would be, like in terms of the actual dollar amount, particularly when you take into account how you can raise your profile when you are part of a winning team, when you're part of a team that gets to the finals, gets to a championship. Like, that can raise your dollar amount a lot. Like Reggie Jackson, this is a perfect example. What he did this offseason, it's not just that he played really well in the playoffs, it's that he played really well on a long playoff run with a very high profile team in the Clippers.
Right. Like, and you thinking, what did he sign? 2 years, $11 million per?
Yeah,
something like that.
11, 12 million
Yeah,
per.
it's a great payday for somebody like him, and that's awesome.
Absolutely. And I'm really curious, and this may be something we get into specifically with a couple of the mailbag questions, but just in general, I'm really curious with the different ways Nunn may be used on this team, because he's the most established of any of the young guys that they have. And he's the one that you can look at.
And you don't count Bazemore in that group, right? He's not. He's one of the old. I mean, he's 32.
He's middle. I consider him somewhere in the middle, but 32, you're not a young guy. I mean, you may be a young guy on this team, but that doesn't make you a young guy. It just makes, you're surrounded by a bunch of
another guy. He's sort of in that tweener place where, like, yeah, maybe, but he's pretty much in that 1 to 2 year deal, and just what varies is it a minimum deal or is it a $4 million deal? It's not. He's not in line anymore for that 18 to 20 million that he got a few years ago and spurned the Lakers.
But I am really curious to see the different things that they end up deciding they can do with Nunn, because he is among the three, and I don't count AD in this, obviously. AD is a superstar and Bazemore's too old. The three truly young guys that they have, Nunn is by far, again, the most established in terms of exactly
right.
You have an idea of what he can do. He obviously can still get better. You don't know as much about what TH2 can truly do. And Malik Monk, like you said, is kind of a mystery at this point.
Yeah. I do think Nunn's, and what he likes about, Miami, all this stuff with Kyle Lowry and all that kind of forced them to really let him go. There's a lot of finances going on there. But one of the things that happened in Miami with Nunn was, like, his playing time would go up and down. He'd start and then he'd be out of the rotation. And so he was obviously good enough to play, but then it just, here, I think what he does have is a pretty clear path to a nightly 20 minutes. I do think they're absolutely going to experiment with him playing with Russ, not just behind him. I think they're going to try all kinds of funky lineups, because Westbrook physically defensively is hit and miss. I think good at some things, not so much at others, but physically he's large enough and strong enough that he can do a lot of different stuff. And Nunn is a pretty stout guy, even at a shorter stature. So they're going to try all kinds of things. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think he could absolutely. This is my favorite. I know we're going to do something later. We talk a little about some of the stuff that we're really excited about, some of our, maybe our favorite moves, whatever. The Nunn thing, to foreshadow a little bit, is my favorite signing that they made. I love that. Love that contract. I love the pickup. I think he's a perfect fit for what they could get and what they needed. Let's talk about Kuz. Okay. And then we'll open up the mailbag, because his responses, I think, kind of put a good framing on a lot of the things that we've talked about in this episode. One in particular that you pulled, we'll talk about it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. Bars covered in 100% chocolate. They are soft, they are easy to chew, and they are healthy. They are great for health-conscious people trying to lose or maintain weight, but you still want to be able to eat something now and then that tastes awesome. They're low-calorie, they're low-sugar, they're high-protein, they're high-fiber. They are great for keto diet folks, and they taste awesome. You've got 12 original flavors like raspberry, coconut almond, salted caramel, banana bread, new flavors like cherry barcia, lemon almond cheesecake, cookies and cream. They just great taste combinations. They're unique. They stand out on their own, and you are never going to feel like you're getting bored eating the same crap over and over and over because you're trying to get fit. So go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. You get 15% off your first order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com.
Locked On Lakers also brought to you by Bet Online, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball season, it's in full swing. You can track all the action at Bet Online, get all the latest news, odds, and info for all your sporting needs, whether it's baseball, UFC, MMA, or whatever other sports happen during August. Get yourself early in on all those other things for the upcoming NHL and NBA seasons too. Start early now. So before the next pitch, head over to Bet Online on your laptop or your mobile device. Check out all the great sign-up bonuses and contest information. 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use the promo code Locked On. Again, when you go to the website or your mobile device and sign up, you get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use the promo code Locked On. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. So Andy, Kyle Kuzma, he got on I guess he was on a flight this
Yeah, it
weekend,
was a
had a
flight.
little time to kill, and so he put it out there for the people. Let's ask me anything. I got some time to kill, and people responded with their tweets and all that. So, favorite memories. What's your favorite memory as a Laker? Championship number 17. What food spot in LA you gonna miss? Nobu and Malibu. I've never been, but I'd always kind of want to. I could see
He said
why.
there's one in DC, but it's just not
It's
the
not
same
the same.
vibe.
It's not the same. I
No.
agree. So all
Probably
of that
isn't, to
stuff,
be honest.
it's probably
it is difficult to replicate Nobu in Malibu.
Malibu. It's
Like
difficult
that
to
is
replicate
really
anything in
like
Malibu.
that's not Kuz being a like a diva or like an extreme 1%er. That's just being honest.
Well, it is both.
Yeah.
It is actually both of those things.
Okay.
The most interesting thing is, and I think you have a picture of it. He was asked by Kuz Control, obviously a big fan, at Kuz Control, a guy named Youssef, what can we expect from you in DC next season? And his response was, more than I did in the past 2 years. I can tell you that. And this gets to one of the things that I think has always been true about Kyle Kuzma is that he believes that he is really goddamn good. And, I remember, was it a couple years ago when he talked about the All-Star team and 6th man of the year, I think it was, or whatever, and set the bar incredibly high and fell well below.
Yeah.
But what I loved about that move was it wasn't like other people putting it on him. It was like, this is me. I'm putting the bar up here and I expect to go cross it. And it didn't work, but he's doing it again here. Like, the guy has an enormous amount of confidence in his own ability, and I respect that.
Well, it also, though, speaks to expectations that you have within a certain setting and how you feel like you're being used as part of an overall team goal. In the last couple of years, Kuz has been and this is really important to point out, without complaining, because I don't think Kuzma has been complaining at all.
No,
But
I
he's
think
made
there's a
it
difference. There's a difference between complaining and letting other people know what you think.
right.
Like,
But it
he's
has
being
been
honest at times, but about
right.
his role, but not. He did it. He still went out and
Right.
did it.
That's what I was going to say. It's been very clear that he thinks he could be doing more in a, for lack of a better way of putting it, counting numbers way, or, pecking order way, totem
Sure.
pole way, than he has been with this team. And that he's capable of, doing more star things than he did the last couple of years with the Lakers. He also was very outwardly cognizant of, these are the things that I need to do. I want to be a part of winning. I know that winning that championship meant a lot to Kuzma. I've talked with him about what it meant to him. And, it was not lost on him that he was the only one of the kids who remained after the Anthony Davis deal. And, he's the only one of them that has had this type of winning attached to him. Like, he's the only one who has been an important rotation player on a championship team. And stuff like that matters. But, when you have ambition, there's nothing wrong with thinking like, look, I can do more than what's being asked of me, particularly when you're like Kuzma and you're entering the prime of your career and you only have so many more opportunities to definitively show it one way or the other. So I think as long as you do what's being asked of you with the right attitude, and I think Kuz did, if you think you're capable of doing more and you want to do more, and maybe you would be open to doing more in a situation where, like in DC, he's not going to win a championship. He's not going to come anywhere close to winning a championship. That shouldn't make you think any less of Kuz. Maybe you think he's deluded, like in terms of what he's actually capable of doing. I suppose he'll get that opportunity to show it in Washington. But I don't think it should make you feel any less about him as long as he was doing the stuff that he needed to with the Lakers, and I thought he did.
It, to me also, too, to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about initially, the role that Kuz played last year was made easier. And they didn't win a title. It didn't work out. But if there was a bright spot in terms of guys who advanced as basketball players, it was Kuz. The one thing that he didn't do as consistently as people expected was the scoring aspect of it. But as a basketball player, he got a lot better
Yeah, he did.
And part of the reason he was able to do that was because he was paid. They gave him a contract that could make him feel secure going forward. Staying with the Lakers, great. Going somewhere else, great. Everybody, like, he could feel like if I am asked to do something that is going to hurt my marketability in accounting stats kind of way, and that stuff still matters. I realize people break down numbers, and Alex Caruso got $9 million a year because people understand defensive analytics and all that other stuff. But the accounting numbers still make a difference. So like it matters if a guy puts up 18 a game, and Kuz was not in a position to be able to do that, and you could tell he was uncomfortable with it that first year. And by paying him, the Lakers put themselves in a position where they could ask him to do all that stuff, and he could do it comfortably. And I think it's going to work out for him. And I think he's going to get another similar contract to this one when he's done. And I really wish him the best, because I think he's a guy who wants to be good and puts in the work. That's the difference between him and like Schroeder last year, or a difference is that Kuz had some of that security, and Schroeder was still in a business place in a much different spot. And Harrell was in a much different spot from a business standpoint. And, when you go back and like when I go back and revisit that trade and my thinking about it, there's, the alternate world in which the Lakers don't get hurt. They go deep in the playoffs. Schroeder doesn't have the disastrous end of the Phoenix series, all that stuff. There's a whole Earth 2 somewhere where it looks like, Schroeder played pretty well. And like this season went well. And, he looked a lot like the OKC guy when it was all said and done. And, okay, go sign a contract in 84, whatever. They obviously didn't have
a shitty contract. I'm sorry, man. It would have been a terrible contract for the Lakers.
But there's a world in which
it could have happened. Yes.
Right. It could have happened. And
hell, they tried to make it happen.
Right. While you think he would have been overpaid, there's no question. I know where you stand on this, but the performance wouldn't have left everybody going, are you kidding me? Like he turned down 84 million, and he's going to be lucky if he gets, 25.
Over how many years? I mean, I'm not even kidding.
No, I know. I'm not trying to, and I'm not making light, but like, Schroeder played, and we'll do a lot on Schroeder once he actually lands somewhere, but like he played really hard. I mean, I really don't have a lot of problems with him on the court. I think, and you've pointed this out, I think a lot, and I think we're both pointing to this now as something you look at in hindsight and go, this is maybe why things were different last year versus the year before, on top of all the other stuff, is context. And the context of Kuzma, who still clearly thinks that he was being limited in what he was able to do as a Laker, even while doing it for good reasons. I think they've worked a little harder to find more of that this year, better context, than they did last.
I will say though, one more contextual difference though that I think is really important when you talk about this comparison between Kuzma and Schroeder, that I think, if nothing else, speaks incredibly well of Kuzma.
Sure.
When Kuzma,
who's also, it should be noted, is just a much more likable personality.
Well, he's a more likable personality, though. Let's not twist it. Kuzma has rubbed a lot of people wrong through his personality.
No question.
Kuzma's personality is not for everybody. Just because,
but he's not German Rondo.
No, he's not German Rondo. But I think it might be a stretch to say that Kuzma's personality strikes most people as likable. I think
he's not Jared Dudley either.
Right. But the first year that Kuzma did this stuff that really was team focused, less than he thought he was capable of, whether you agree with him or not, he not only had not gotten his first payday, like Kuzma was still on his rookie deals when he did this.
Yep.
Many people, including you and me, both thought the Lakers were not going to extend him.
I agree.
The general consensus was that Kuzma wasn't going to get an extension, as opposed to was.
But he also was. He talked a lot. He was more outwardly, and I don't even want to say passive aggressively, however you want to frame it, more outwardly willing to talk about how he wasn't happy with his role and stuff.
Right, but he still, though, I thought did it with a more professional attitude than Schroeder had, and this is a big difference, though. Schroeder has already banked like $90 million versus Kuzma at the time had done like 7. And I don't begrudge.
Sure.
I don't begrudge Schroeder for wanting more money. Get all the money you can possibly get. That's not my point. My point is simply when you do that like Kuzma, when you've yet to even bank your first big deal, and it's looking like that first big deal, you're going to be waiting even longer.
Yeah,
I think it speaks exceptionally well to his professionalism in a way that you didn't see with Schroeder.
So. Absolutely.
I'm just being honest.
My only point there was that Schroeder's focus on the business part of this is normal. Let's save the mailbag because, we don't want to give short shrift to any of these questions, whether the Doncast has a good one for us.
Yeah, we got some good ones.
Will Power, my man Slut for Pudding at Lakers in My Blood left a couple good ones. Burson at Kamenetzky Brothers at
Slut
gmail.com.
for Pudding is a Pornhub category.
It might be. But I also I love pudding. I also consider myself a slut for pudding. I love
please
pudding.
Tell me none of it's on Pornhub.
No, it's private.
And it should stay that way.
I'm not a millennial, Andy. I understand that not everything needs to be filmed. Pudding is really,
some things
really
less
delicious.
than others.
It's really delicious. So I'm very pro pudding. So we'll do a lot of mailbag this week, but we don't want to do it and not give it enough time. So thanks to everybody again for subscribing, for checking out Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Great place to get all the news as it continues to filter in. We'll see everybody next time. Thanks.